Do you think it's worth it to buy hardware synths anymore? Have you been busy working on a subsequent 25 by any chance? An artist is able to release stems or loops along with their tracks and implement a tracking system to ensure you get a cut of earnings if someone uses your loops in their track. What are your thoughts on the new Star Wars movie? Hey guys, and welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It is Friday. It's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's video, I don't think there's any house admin. Happy New Year to you all, because my last AMA would have been last year. Looking at house admin, I don't see anything of any value here because I've basically had the week off. I've not really done anything. Yeah, I mean, I've basically done bits of admin, but nothing that's worth talking to you about. I can't think of anything else coming up either. So yeah, I hope you all had a good New Year and celebrated it in style, whatever it is you did. I didn't do much, obviously, having a newborn baby. We stayed in and were in bed by about 1 minute past midnight, I think, which, you know what, was perfect. So yeah, it's all good. Right, let's have a look at last week's. Is it last week's? Yes. Ask Me Anything 84. Starting at the top, Gold Toast. Hey Dom, Happy New Year. Hope you haven't done any street racing with your BMW over the holiday. It's not a BMW, but how dare you. Remember, you're a family man now. Jokes aside, I've been thinking about buying the Korg MiniLog as my first hardware synth. Also looking at the Moog subsequent 37, but it's more expensive, so I thought the Korg would be a good place to start. Now, my question is, do you think it's worth it? Do you think it's worth it to buy hardware synths anymore? Is software just as good, or does hardware synths actually add something, or are they just a hassle that never gets used? So, I've kind of talked about some of these things before. First of all, no street racing. No, not over Christmas anyway. But the weather will hopefully start turning soon, so I will be going back on the track, which is where you should be going if you want to race. Yeah, not quite the season yet. You've been thinking about the Korg MiniLog, okay, or the Moog subsequent 37. Now, I'm going to be biased. And in fact, even if I try and remove my bias, I genuinely think Moog make some of, if not the greatest synthesizers ever. Now, before I go any further on that line though, I always think it's worth establishing what is it you're looking for in a synth. Because for me personally, I don't feel like I need a huge amount of hardware synths, especially if you're talking about particular types of synths. So, for example, my Sub 37 is monophonic or paraphonic, but let's call it monophonic, and it's a subtractive synth. So the type of synthesis applied is subtractive, meaning it has a noise source, and then you subtract elements, i.e. run it through filters and modulators, blah, blah, blah. Now, in general, and this is a very broad sweeping statement, but in general, most subtractive synths make the same kinds of sounds, albeit slightly different character, but essentially the same kinds of sounds. And that doesn't matter whether it's a VST on your computer or hardware, whether it be analog, whether it be digital, it doesn't matter. Subtractive synthesis generally makes the same sounds. Obviously, you're going to have differences in number of oscillators, types of filters, any additional effects and features that might be added in there. But you get the idea. So I think it's you always need to distinguish what it is you're looking for in a synth and what the pros and cons are of anything. So, for example, the subsequent 37 is paraphonic, but again, I'm going to call it monophonic because yes, you can press two notes at the same time, but you're not going to be playing chords and melodies at the same time. So let's just call it monophonic, which instantly means it can only do, say, bass lines and lead lines and maybe some effects and bits and pieces like that. It's never going to be a full orchestra type sound. You're not going to be able to sit there and play it like a piano. Whereas something like the Korg MiniLog, I'm pretty sure, double check this, but I'm 99% sure the MiniLog is polyphonic. I feel like it's not because mini, I'm thinking of mono, not mini, but MiniLog means small. Monolog would be single. Yeah, I'm gonna trust my judgment here. The MiniLog is polyphonic, so you can sit there and play it like a piano. So those are the fundamental differences between those two synths. They're both subtractive. To my understanding, I haven't played the MiniLog in a long time, but from what I remember, there's things like reverb and stuff built in. I think it's digital oscillators. I honestly can't remember, but I do know a few people who have them and they love the MiniLog. So I think the point I'm trying to get at is, as much as for me personally, the Moog would win hands down every time, it also comes down to what you're looking for, because I have known people who have messaged me privately saying that they bought the Moog whatever because I'd been talking about it and saying how much I loved it or whatever, and that they found they just didn't use it and it wasn't getting used and it didn't do chords and it was a bit restrictive and whatever. I like those restrictions. For me as a musician, I think it forces me to think outside the box, whereas for a lot of people, they just want something that's plug and play. If you're looking for something that's plug and play, then I maybe don't go for a Moog, and certainly not the subsequent 37, because while yes, you get the VST editor and you can save presets and states and whatever, for me, I see those things as super easy and fluid and whatever, because I come from a world where everything used to be analog. Whereas I think for modern day producers, that's probably quite slow and cumbersome. For me, the big advantage of hardware is the fact that you can sit there and turn all the dials and play to your heart's content. And silly things like the fact that I can turn two dials at the same time. I can sometimes do three if my fingers stretch far enough. Whereas that's not something I can do with a mouse. I can only turn one dial with a mouse. So, without using automation, if I want to sort of do something by hand, then hardware gives me an extra advantage there. So there are little subtle differences. For me, it's about the whole creative process. It's not about the end result. It's about the process. And that's why I like hardware in general. I don't care if it's analog or digital, but it's the fact that I can get my hands on it. And the one thing I've always said about my Sub 37 is the fact that it has all the dials, potentiometers, buttons, whatever, in front of you. And I know the predecessor to the Sub 37 was the Little Fatty, which I loved, but it was a bit annoying when you wanted to change maybe the filter cutoff and the resonance at the same time. You couldn't do that because you had two buttons. You'd hit cutoff and you could turn that dial for cutoff, hit resonance, and that same dial was the resonance. So you couldn't do both at the same time, whereas with the Sub 37 you've got both those knobs right in front of you. So yeah, I think that's something that I love about the Sub 37. Yeah, so I've probably ranted for a long time about those two synths. So I guess I can't give you an exact answer because they're worlds apart in that one's polyphonic, one's monophonic, one's fully analog, the other I can't remember. I think it's maybe analog oscillators and digital rest, I'm not sure. But I think the important part to remember is the final sounds that they make, the sounds they're capable of making, are very similar. They're not identical, but they are very similar in that they are both subtractive synths. So don't worry too much about that. I would say you need to ask yourself, what is it you're looking for? Is it something that's hands-on and controllable like the Sub 37, and you're not too bothered about having more than one note playing at a time, or is the more than one note thing more important for you, or do you not really care about the hands-on and you want things to be quick and easy? Because if you want things to be quick and easy, then I'd say neither of them. Get yourself a good VST because they're quick and easy. So yeah, you're saying, is software just as good? I would say it's 90-95% as good. You're never going to get the accuracy of a perfect analog sine wave to be in the digital realm, based on the fact that an analog sine wave has an infinite sample rate, whereas a digital, there's always a finite sample rate to digital stuff. However, the argument against that is that if you're recording an analog sine wave into your computer anyway, then it's going to end up digital and there's going to be a finite sample rate in there anyway. And that's before we even talk about things like digital op amps inside amplifiers and stuff like that. So they're basically the same, I guess is what I'm saying. I think long gone is the argument of analog being better than digital. It's just somewhat different, that's all. So yeah, I would say there's pretty much nothing an analog synth can do that software can't replicate or emulate in one way or another. So does hardware synths add something? Well, it does to me, because I like my hands on, and I like to, when I'm writing a piece of music, and I want it to evolve over time, I like to record it in and play bits by hand, and I like to turn the dials by hand, because I like to sort of go by feeling rather than mathematically drawing in lines, which is where hardware comes into play. However, you could, I guess, get a VST and maybe a MIDI controller and then do it by hand, but it tends to be a bit too notchy then when I'm doing it. So there we go. That's my rant on that. Zombo, see you next year, Dom. Sorry I had to throw a dad joke in there. Question, what are your thoughts on the new Star Wars movie? Okay, I loved it, to be honest. I loved it. I felt like when the new trilogy was announced and that it was Disney, I was okay with that, because I felt like they did a great job with Tron and Tron Legacy, and I think they have put out some great sci-fi films, so I wasn't too worried. Also, I think you've got to remember, let's be really honest, the original Star Wars films were, okay, not kids films, but somewhat family friendly, and they were never really designed for hardcore nerds or whatever, and there was a lot of slapstick style humour in there, and they were quite cheesy. So I think I was okay with Disney taking over. That was never an issue for me. I know a lot of people just wanted to hate it because it was Disney. So I didn't really have any major expectation. I wasn't expecting it to be good or bad when Force Awakens came out. But when it did come out, I was blown away, and I thought it was brilliant. And I felt like J.J. Abrams had a really tough challenge ahead of him making that film, because the first one of that trilogy was in a whole new era of CGI and filmmaking and plotting and everything. That the whole world is different now to how it was 20 years ago, let alone 40 years ago with the originals. And we knew there were going to be new characters being introduced, and I think he had a huge challenge to appeal to the original fans, but also knowing that that wasn't necessarily going to be his main demographic, because there was a whole new generation of people that it needed to appeal to, and it needed to appeal to people who maybe hadn't seen the original trilogy. God forbid they exist. So I felt like The Force Awakens just nailed it in every aspect of that, because there was just enough new characters and just enough, callbacks to the previous trilogies to kind of keep everyone happy without pissing off too many people. Obviously, there was going to be people annoying. There's always going to be 40-year-old guys who don't realise that they're no longer 5 years old, and that they're not going to have the same nostalgia over these things. However, episode 8, it kind of threw me. I keep referring it to as Mary Poppins in space. And so this new film, which I'll get onto now, the new film, I felt like it needed to make up for its loss in the previous film, which was a huge challenge, because I just felt the previous film, I just came out of the cinema kind of thinking, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, and I really wanted to love it, and I was so excited because The Force Awakens built my expectations up. I went into Force Awakens with no expectations, came out of there going, wow, that was just mind-blowing, and I want more. And then the second of that trilogy, I went in there thinking, how is this going to progress? And it kind of didn't progress, really. There was just some weird plot twists that I felt were just thrown in there for the sake of having some plot, and it didn't actually progress the whole story. So I came out of there thinking, I don't really, I mean, my memory sucks anyway, but I don't really know what I've just watched and what just happened. It seems to be a whole lot of nothing. So this third one of the trilogy, I was nervous going in, because I felt like it was make it or break it for me, and I felt like if it let me down, I think I was done with the whole saga, to be honest. I was prepared to just go, you know what, it's not for me anymore. Maybe I've changed, I don't know. But no, I came out of there having loved it. And again, I think Abrams had a huge challenge ahead of him in trying to make up for the previous one. But also, how do you tie off all those loose ends? Again, there's going to be people who didn't like it. There's going to be people who felt like some of it was irrelevant, or some of it went on for too long, or some of it not long enough, or whatever. But I just felt like it ticked all the right boxes for me. So yeah, very happy. There we go. That is my in-depth review with no spoilers of the latest Star Wars film. Yanis Lukmelis, hi Don, cool Star Wars jumper, thank you very much. Happy New Year. And BMW, Andrew Hollis, BMW, high five. I should have given everyone else who's mentioned BMW a high five. So Gold Toast, high five to you. Yanis Lukmelis, high five to you. And Andrew Hollis, I've already given you a high five, you're not having two. And Happy New Year. Have you been busy working on a subsequent 25 by any chance? No. But what's that? Is that a rumour? I don't follow the rumour mill. So is Moog preparing to launch the subsequent 25? I mean, I guess that it would make some sense, because the other thing I forgot to mention earlier on when you mentioned Moogs, or someone mentioned Moogs, was it Gold Toast? Yeah, is the price point of a Moog is obviously higher than your average. But actually, on that note, the price point for me, I think, is absolutely worth it. First of all, look into the way that Moog run their business model, and they profit share with the employees. So, I mean, that's brilliant. So, you know, all the employees of Moog are clearly happy with their jobs, or I hope they are, but they seem to be, which I think is very important. Second of all, if you look at the little details, like the packaging of the good quality, robust but recycled and eco-friendly cardboard that the boxes come in, and the packaging, and the leaflets inside with the things like the schematics of the PCB of how the synth is made. All of these things, you know, are just meticulously thought through, and they're not just a product you buy and use and dispose of afterwards. They're, you know, it's kind of the counterculture to the throwaway generation. And I think, you know, you buy a Moog, you keep the Moog, and you keep it in good condition, and you maintain it, because it's something worth maintaining. And there's a lot to be said for that whole buying experience of buying something of that quality. So on that note, going back to Andrew Hollis's question, so no, I haven't been working on that, and I wouldn't even know about it, even if I was part of the Fatty series preset developers, because, well, unless they want to release it with a whole new bunch of presets, which maybe they would, but I wouldn't have thought they would. There's probably no need to. I should imagine it would keep the same sounds as the original subsequent 37, I'm guessing. But again, I haven't seen it, so, and I guess maybe it could have one less oscillator or something less. I don't know. My guess is, if it's by subsequent 25, it's a 25 note smaller keyboard layout, which means it'll be a smaller dial layout, which takes away everything I just said earlier on about the sub 37 having one dial for each parameter, which is great. So I can understand there being a market for that, because I'm assuming the price point will be lower, and therefore a good entry level Moog to get if you're looking for a high quality analog, well designed and well produced product that's perhaps monophonic. Then I can see that being, well, the best you can get, the best money can buy. So yeah, I would have thought that's a good entry level. So yeah, makes sense. But no, I haven't worked on it, and I wasn't aware of the rumours until you've just said. So thank you very much for that, because I don't keep up with the rumour mill. I probably should, but I don't. Where are we on time? We've got time for another one. Cavalcade. Hi Dom, Happy New Year. BMW, high five. The tune Emanate thing seems to be set up with the intention of giving artists a more equitable proportion of the earnings from their tracks, as well as getting payments to them faster. Emanate is also talking about a system where an artist is able to release stems or loops along with their tracks and implement a tracking system to ensure you get a cut of earnings if someone uses your loops in their track. It just strikes me as an interesting business model that prioritises the artist ahead of the multitude of people who take the greater cut of earnings in the case of major labels. P.S. Die Hard and Die Hard 2 is unquestionably a Christmas movie. Anyone who says otherwise is just plain wrong. I agree, and that includes the director of Die Hard. P.P.S. Last Christmas has sleigh bells, so it must be a Christmas song. That's how it works, isn't it? True. P.P.P.S. The Expanse, I know, and I nearly watched an episode this morning, but I didn't. Right. Okay. So the tune emanate thing. Okay. So it sounds like it will be a good idea. As for tracking loops used in other people's tracks, I'm not sure if that's maybe you that got the details wrong there, or whether that's them being sneaky. But my understanding of every loops pack I've ever sold, and I've sold a lot of loops packs in my time, they're all royalty free, and by paying for that loops pack, you are paying for the usage rights to use it in a track. The only thing you can't do is sell it on as an individual loop or sound in its entirety, and it's not for commercial use in that sense, but you are free to stack 10 of them up together and sell that as an individual track. So tracking usage of loops shouldn't be done. Well, I mean, it's fine to be done if everyone's happy to do it, but it shouldn't be a profitable thing. But that's fine. It might be. There might be a misunderstanding there. Releasing stems. I mean, that's something you can do anyway, so that's cool. But I think it was it Beatport tried doing a stems thing. And Native Instruments as well, actually. They did, can't remember what it was called. I even did one or two for them. I can't remember what it was called. But I don't think that took off as much as people wanted it to. So that's okay. So you also mentioned, so you've mentioned various things, but you also mentioned, strikes me as an interesting business model that prioritises the artist ahead of the multitude of people who take the greater cut of earnings in the case of major labels. So major labels take a much, much greater cut. 100% I agree. However, the one thing to be said in their defence, not that I want to be defending major labels, but in their defence, they invest far greater money into promoting and marketing that release as well. So it swings and roundabouts, really. You know, you could sign to a label that gives you 100% royalties, but chances are they're not investing any money into marketing, and maybe they're not going to get you much exposure, or certainly not any more than you would have otherwise got yourself. Whereas signing to a major label, clearly the exposure is tenfold, at the very least. So it makes sense that they take a bigger cut. However, that's not to say they should take as much as they take, because a lot of those percentages haven't changed in 30 years, whereas the industry is radically different to where it was 30 years ago. So yeah, it sounds like that tune emanate thing, it sounds interesting. If I'm brutally honest, I'm not sure if it would be for me. So I think for me to run a label, I think, and this is a tricky one at the moment, because I don't know what's out there. I haven't looked properly, but I will start looking soon. I would need a distributor that is intimately on board with the musical vision of the label, because I would want to individually package each release, and while I would pay focus to certain online stores, what I don't want is for every release to be available in hundreds of online stores, because I don't think that's worth doing. I think it's better to pay more focus and attention to 4, 5, 6 stores that are actually going to give you the exposure and promotion that it requires. So that means sort of direct contact with these companies. For example, I would say 100% right now, if you wrote a track that had a 2-minute long musical intro without any drums or whatever, and it wasn't 4 to the floor 128 BPM generic prog house or whatever, then putting it on Beatport is probably completely and utterly pointless, because nobody who uses Beatport uses it to just sit down and listen to something on headphones or whatever. They're a DJ who are going to chuck it in a DJ set and take it to a nightclub, and they want it to be a track to mix from one track into another. So a 2-minute musical intro is not what they're going to buy. So there's no point, it doesn't matter if you're front page of Beatport with huge promotions. I'm just going to reset the camera because it's going to do it itself in a second. I was watching that countdown then. I don't even know if it caught the end of the last word, which was second. But anyway, I'm back. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that I would need to be quite careful with distribution, because, a lot of distributors will claim that they push for promotions in places like Beatport. Well, my guess is I have not signed any music yet. I haven't set up the label yet, but my guess is the music is probably not going to be Beatport friendly. It's going to be more focused at people who sit down and listen to music, or go for a drive and listen to music. People who listen to music rather than people who enjoy the thrill ride of a roller coaster and go clubbing to listen to music. And to get shit-faced to music. It's more for people who just want to chill and listen to quality music. So our demographic would not be Beatport users. So I'm using Beatport as an example. This goes for probably almost every online store you and I use as DJs. But the point being is, there are some people who chuck 10 grand at getting, everything marketed towards a Beatport number one. Well, that just wouldn't be of any interest to me. So I'm like I say, I've got to be very careful in how I choose distribution. But thank you for the recommendation. And it's a shame that their site is down and they're not running at the minute, because it does sound interesting. So if you see that they come back on, then let me know, because I'll check it out. And finally, Dreamstate42. Hey Dom BMW, high five, love your Christmas sweater, may the force be with you, or may the force set you free, depending on your allegiance. About the Bitwig nudge shortcut, that one is low to medium importance to me, although I'm a heavy shortcut user. The less I have to move the mouse, the better. I was baffled more about the fact that there is a customizable shortcut that essentially does not work, which is not a very good user experience in my opinion. There was... I've got to admit, it hasn't really impacted me hugely, but there was a fundamental difference I remember at the beginning of Bitwig. So using your QWERTY keyboard as a MIDI keyboard, you have to have caps lock on. And with caps lock off, if you press D, for example, it takes you to devices or shows devices on the screen. And there was a fundamental reason to certain shortcuts being slightly different or just not being what I wanted them to be. And the reason was due to the caps lock thing, and because if you pressed a certain letter, it would go to the search box and search for that thing. So I know that there were differences in there. I don't know if that affects what you're talking about. I don't really know, but you say it doesn't really suit Bitwig and their very forward-thinking approach to do something sloppy like that, to put it over the top. So I think there's always going to be stuff, and if I'm honest, I'm thinking that a nudge shortcut is probably a handy one, but it depends on their reason for it not being done. And my guess is their reason for it not being implemented the way you want it is probably down to existing source code doing something different in that area, which is why I mentioned the caps lock situation there, because that will have an impact in how things are able to be implemented in the future. So I don't know if there's a knock-on effect where maybe there was a mistake in the original or just an oversight or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. I can see there's a couple of replies here. I'm just going to skim through. Andrew Hollis has replied, in the editor you can select a note, notes, clips, etc. Use shift plus arrow keys to nudge. What it can't do is nudge clips, events in the arranger, which is not great. I use nudge to move stuff off the grid as a laptop user due to a lack of desk. Yeah, and you've replied, yes, nudging works if you use the shortcut that's set by default, but as soon as you adjust the shortcuts, it stops working. Ah, okay. Which is not the best user experience. Yeah, that does sound like it might be a bit of a bug rather than a feature. But I don't know the reason. My guess is there's probably a reason that when you do change it, it has a knock-on effect on something else that means a fundamental change that they haven't got around to doing. So maybe internally the problem is much bigger than it first seems, because from the outside I feel like changing a shortcut, a default position of shortcut, should be really straightforward and takes 2 seconds to implement. But maybe the reality is somewhat deeper. I don't know the reasoning, but maybe it's deeper. Who knows? But like I say, so long as you're in touch with support, you know, I've always had great feedback and whatever with support for Bitwig, so I know I'm one of their pro users and whatever, so you'd expect me to get good support. But I do think it's worth chasing these things up every now and then, because we all know how priority lists work. That, my friends, is it. Where are we? Yeah, we're up to almost 40 minutes, I think. So yeah, there we go. Like I say, I hope you've all had a good new year. If you've made it this far into the video, then prove it by commenting the word slow, because the video here is my slow decline from altitude sickness. Ooh, I did watch that the other day, so I don't know why it's recommending I watch it again or something. Seems a bit weird. But yeah, that's a photographer I follow, Thomas Heaton. Shout out to Thomas Heaton, a great landscape photographer, and he's currently, or was, in the Himalayas, which looks awesome. So check out his channel. And I think that is it. Yeah, so I hope you've had a happy new year, and I hope you have a good weekend. And it's back to work now, isn't it? I'll see you next week. Cheers.